Welcome back, everybody. Today we are continuing our mini series, and I have on homeschooling when life is hard. And today I have with me Kristen Rudd. Welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
I'm happy to be here. This is going to be fun.
Yes, absolutely. And by the way, your background is fabulous. I love it. I kept trying to figure out a way to, have my books in the background, but then that meant setting up my desk in the middle of the living room and telling everyone they couldn't speak in the common room of the house. So I was like, I guess I'm just gonna have to have whatever. But
yeah, it's pretty fun.
Yeah. Well, let me introduce Kristen Rudd to all of you. In case you don't know her, you need to know her. So let me share some stuff about her. So Kristen Rudd lives in Cary, North Carolina, and has been homeschooling her children for 12 years. Both her children are now high school students and continue to enjoy homeschooling. She offers online high school literature and writing classes and gives talks and workshops on teaching, literature, and writing whenever she gets a chance. Kristen is the founder and director of the Piedmont Classical Forum, a regular contributor to the Circe Institute, and the brains and heart behind hashtag 100 Days of Dante, hashtag Everyday Ovid, and hashtag This is Epic. These are Facebook groups to help people read classics in community, and they're open to anyone. They're fabulous. Definitely check them out.
Oh, thank you.
Kristen previously taught for 3 years at Sola Gracia Classical Academy. Over the course of her tenure there, she taught formal logic to high school students and literature, poetics, and grammar to upper elementary school students. Prior to that, she taught Lost Tools of Writing to middle school students online. Kristen graduated from the Circe Institute Apprenticeship Program in 2019 and is a Circe Certified Master Classical Teacher.
Ooh.
Yes, me too. Alum. Okay. An established writer, Kristen's published works can be found online at the Circe Institute, the Torrey Gazette, the Center for Lit, and Fathom Mag. In her spare time, she writes fiction and poetry, lifts heavy weights, eats tacos, and defends Dido, Queen of Carthage, to anyone who dares smack talk her. May her memory be eternal. Welcome.
Thank you. That's fun. That's fun to hear somebody read all that.
Yes, I feel like I want you to write my bio because this just reads so well. I'm like,
oh, good.
You can actually make that a side business. Just like, I will write your bio.
I will write your bio.
$200 a pop.
Do it.
Yep. Yes. Well, welcome. I'm so glad that you're here. And today we're facing head on homeschooling when it's hard. Life is great. There's all sorts of wonderful things that happen in life, but sometimes it's just straight up hard. And we want to not pretend that that's not a thing. And how do we homeschool? That's a lot of responsibility when we're facing really hard things. And so I wanted to ask you, what are some of the things that you've faced that is hard things seasons you've gone through that you've had to face while homeschooling? That you're willing to share with us.
Yeah. It's so funny because you're reading that bio and I'm thinking of all the things that I've done in the past few years. And it didn't feel like a lot, but when you read that, it's a lot. Mm-hmm. And in the past 4 years, the first year I started the apprenticeship in 2016, my daughter got pneumonia and was sick for over a month. And then right as she recovered, my husband got pneumonia and was sick for 3 months. And then a couple of years later, so a couple of years ago now, my husband got pneumonia again and was sick for over 5 months. Mm-hmm. In the middle of his illness, he was hospitalized for several days, emergency hospitalization over Thanksgiving weekend. And 4 weeks later, after he had gone through all of that and rested and done all of the stuff he needed to do, he went back to work and had his 4-week checkup after the hospitalization, and they told him that he still had pneumonia. So then he walked into work the next day and was fired. So on top of the double whammy of just the unrecoverable pneumonia and the hospitalization, he got fired 4 days before Christmas. And then we spent the next almost 6 months unemployed. So we've been through a few hard things in the past few years. Yeah. So lots of pneumonia, lots of heavy illness, job loss, just, it's been very difficult. And it's different when your kid is the one who's sick versus when your spouse is the one who's sick.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's just a very different thing.
Yeah. How did those two different play out in terms of how it affected you and your homeschool?
So when my daughter was sick, there wasn't much going on. She slept for 2 weeks straight. She just was in bed for 2 weeks. And then it was very, very tired and difficult to rouse. And she had reacted to her medication. So we had to go into the doctor's office a lot. We just stepped back. I mean, you just pull back. Your expectations just have to change completely. She's just, she would, bless her heart, even like 2 months later, she'd be sitting on the couch doing her math and would just fall asleep because her body just took so long to recover. She lost 10% of her body weight. So most of it was just taking care of her body. I think one of the things I've been thinking about a lot lately is with classical education is how much it involves the body, like how much we need to pay attention to our physical selves, as well as our spiritual and mental and emotional selves when we think about educating the whole person. And there are certain times when the most important thing you can do is take care of the body and maybe re-educate the body. She had to relearn a lot of, not like relearn how to walk or anything, but just relearn how to pace herself, relearn how to kind of take time to do things.
Right.
So just dialing it back, lowering expectations, just giving her a lot of grace, understanding that her physical body was what was the most important thing that she needed right now. Feeding her well, getting her lots of sleep.
That puts a whole new meaning to the idea of gymnastic. We talk about gymnastic in the classical tradition as one of the arts, that I guess, do we consider that an art?
I think it's more of a foundational basis for the arts.
But it just makes me think of that in a different way, the way you talked about the body there, and that not just this self-control and strength thing, but at a very fundamental level beyond just getting stronger, but just the health, the cellular health. And sometimes when I teach high school, and one of the things I'll talk to my students about is sometimes when you're struggling in a class, it's just because you need to eat, like you haven't eaten yet.
Yes. Like, we say that, teenagehood is like the second toddlerhood. You need a snack and a nap. So get your snack and get your nap, and then let's focus on your work. Like you can't ignore that.
I know. I mean, and you teach law school, so that first lesson we teach where we talk about all the, all your problems with writing and that sort of thing. And I'm like, any of this that doesn't fit into one of the that's an actual writing problem usually is like, I need sleep or need to talk about my feelings or need to eat.
Yeah. So that's definitely something we learned. And we've prioritized it. In spite of all of the craziness, in spite of all the illness and the job loss, and then all of the other things I was doing besides homeschooling, doing the apprenticeship, teaching classes outside. When my husband was ill, I was doing everything, cooking, cleaning, all the errands, all the schlepping, just because he needed to rest. And if he didn't rest, he'd be forced to rest. So it was a lot. And the one thing that I never sacrificed, and I will not sacrifice, is my sleep. I know people who just, they run on very little sleep, and I just won't do it. I get pretty good sleep. Sometimes I don't sleep well, but I prioritize my sleep.
Yeah. So, how do you do that? Can you talk about that? Because I'll be honest, like that's one of the things I always sacrifice because I feel like I have to. Like I don't know how to organize my day in a way where I'm not sacrificing that. So how do you because you're doing about about the same amount of stuff that I do, and so how do you do that?
I just do it. So generally during the school year, we're in summertime right now, so schedules are all kinds of crazy, but during the school year, I'm usually in bed by 11.
Okay.
I don't get out of bed till 8 during the school year.
Okay.
Our tradition is we have morning prayers at 8 a.m. So I don't care how you get to the table, just get to the table by 8. So you don't have to have your chores done. You don't have to be dressed. You don't have to do anything by 8 o'clock. We do morning prayers, and then we start school at 9 together. So they've got, 40 to 45 minutes to get dressed and all that. So I'm kind of with them. We roll out of bed at the same time, about 8 o'clock, show up to morning prayers. Okay. I could get a lot more done if I got up earlier, but for me, the sleeping has been pivotal. I'm super healthy. I'm going to say this, now this is going to screw up my ear, but I rarely get sick.
I got you.
I know, I just did it right. So, but I get a lot of sleep, And I work out at least 3 days a week,
Mm-hmm.
which takes time. And this has been one of the catch-22s in everything that I do. It's like, how do you make time to do it? And what I found is that if I don't do it, that's when things start to spiral out of control.
Okay.
If I don't make the time to go to the gym and pick up heavy weights and put them back down, then my mental state, my physical state, my emotional state, they all start to kind of collapse in on each other. And so I found that I have to do that.
Yeah. So I guess what I'm hearing you say is a question that we should one of the questions we can ask ourselves is, what is that thing for us? Maybe it's not lifting heavy weights. Maybe it's going on a walk. Maybe it's like, your prayer time or whatever it is. Like, what is the thing in whoever's listening life that it has that effect on you?
And for me, I'm, a big believer in, we have to take care of our physical bodies. So exercising, whatever that looks like for you, sleep, eating well. Those are just the things that I don't really ever compromise on.
Right.
And, that means that sure, maybe my work piles up a little more because I have fewer hours in my day compared to someone who's getting up early or staying up super late.
Mm-hmm.
But I just triage, just decide what needs to be done today. And that's what gets done.
And so that's what you mean by triage. You just look at, okay, what has to get done today? And
what's the most,
but
you talk about there's like a square of, there are things that are urgent and things that are important.
Mm-hmm.
And things like that are urgent and important. There's kind of like this hierarchy. I do live in a large state of urgent things rather than important things.
Mm-hmm.
But just take things one day at a time.
Right.
When my husband was sick, so one of the things we did when my daughter was sick, because she missed about a month's worth of schoolwork, just completely. She was pretty much asleep solid for the first 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
We were having to rouse her to like try to feed her, and then she was very sick for at least 2 more weeks. And then it took months, several weeks for her to get better. Mm-hmm. And then we got hit with my husband being sick. So I don't really remember how she recovered. So, but we also, that was the year she was in 8th grade. And we decided at the end of that school year that due to the illness and hers and his and everything going on, that we were going to have her do a second 8th grade year, that we would not advance her to high school until the next year. And that turned out to be one of the best decisions I think that we've made in our homeschool. It also means I get to have her for another year. So instead of her being a senior this year, she's only a junior. So I get to keep her a little bit longer.
I know. I experienced the same thing with my son. We reclassed him in 8th grade and he's a senior now. But, I've had him a little bit longer because as soon as he goes, he's going to be gone playing sports. So yes. Yeah.
And she's got dyslexia and ADHD. And she would not mind me sharing these things because she's very open about them with people. And she has always presented very young. Just physically, we call her fun size. She's just small, just always she's matured slowly, which I think has been great because she's had a really, good, solid childhood that she's gotten to have.
Yeah.
So she hasn't matured as faster as a lot of other kids. And so it seemed really appropriate for her to do that. And it's given her a lot of success in high school that I don't know that if we had her go ahead and move up that she would have had.
Yeah.
So just with the maturity and the ability and just, the emotional, intellectual and physical maturity.
Yeah, that's a legitimate option. I know my mom, she's in education. She's been, she's like the dean of students at an elementary school here locally. She's been in the public school system for 30 years. And she said that never once in 30 years has anyone ever regretted holding their kid back.
That's really
another year. Never once, but plenty of people have regretted pushing their kid a year forward or, going against that intuition that, they could really use another year. And that's been my experience as well. And I think that's a legitimate option, whether you're in homeschool or public school and you're finding yourself being at home, like it's really not the end of the world. Like it really is a great viable option if you've had just a crazy hard year.
In our society, especially with kids, we're so concerned that they're going to be behind.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of that going around this year with COVID and people unsure about what schools are going to do and what some people still haven't made decisions. Right. And I just, just calm down. It's going to be okay. Like, just take a breath. Like, you're not going to be behind. There's no such thing. And when you really actually fully believe that, instead of just say it to yourself, it really changes your perspective on what it means to educate your children.
Right. Well, and we're so caught in this, like the point, just to piggyback on your point about we're not really behind. This idea of behind, if you really think about that and force ourselves to say, well, what does it mean to be behind or forward or, on point? It's kind of an illusion. Like, it really is an illusion. Like, who set that standard? And each state is different and each school system is different. Like, it's not a thing.
It's not a thing.
Each test is different. Like, it's completely arbitrary. Did you know there are no laws governing what constitutes a credit and how to create a grading scale? And like, it's when you actually start researching this,
the emperor has no
you're
clothes.
like, what? This is like, all of this is arbitrary, which can be kind of frightening at first if you've been relying on the system, but then it can be really freeing once you step out of the system, because you're like, I really am not missing anything. Like, I really do get to pave my own path. And of course there's, best practices and that sort of thing, but yeah.
Someone on Twitter said the other day that, what if we just don't do online school and just send our kids outside and let them read books the whole time? What if we just did that this year? And I was like, that's honestly probably the best plan that I've heard.
Right.
Because kids don't get to play. And some said, well, they'll be behind. I'm like, if your kid played outside all day and did nothing but read books the rest of the time, I guarantee you they would never be behind.
Right.
There's just no possible way. They would be more fully children and more fully human than kids who are sitting in front of a computer all day. Right.
Amen. I fully, especially in light of like this communal trauma we're kind of going through with COVID, we're at the isolation, the weirdness. I was talking to a friend on the phone this morning and we were talking about how it's just like, we're treating people like we're being put in a situation where we're treating people like everyone's like just toxic, and it's not good for humans to treat. This is really bad. Like, obviously there's a pandemic and, we have to be safe, but the other side of what it's doing to the communal nature and how we interact, like, that's bad. Like, it affects us negatively. And anytime we go through some kind of trauma, having that place of just nourishment, oh my goodness, there's
and being healthy in your body and in your mind, going outside is going to solve a lot of your problems. So.
Absolutely.
So when my husband was sick, because he's been sick twice now in the past 4 years for months at a time, that was much harder. Because all the burden on all of the household chores and everything fell on me. And the first time around, we had some help. People would bring some meals over. We had someone pay to have our house cleaned, but it was pretty rough. And then this last time, every time I think about this, I just think that it's miraculous. The weekend that Joshua went into the hospital, we were supposed to have friends over for dinner. He got sick 10 minutes before they showed up. So they still showed up because, it happened very fast. He went downhill very fast. And they came over, we had dinner. He stayed in the bedroom. They took our kids and our dog for like 2 full days, just like that. Like, went home from dinner with our children and our animal. So anything that happened could happen. And it turns out that he did get sick and we had to take him to the ER and he had to stay in the hospital. And I got up and I went, stayed in the hospital till I think 3 a.m, came home, ate, slept for an hour and went to teach class all day. Then went back to the hospital. Like, just people took our kids, the homeschool group we were a part of. A friend started a page to bring us meals. We had people bring us meals for almost 2 straight weeks. And then when he was still sick, and we told people that he was still sick right before Christmas. This is great. This is a really great story. The day he got fired, he went in at 8 a.m. and was getting fired, not knowing, obviously, that you're getting fired. Someone showed up at my house, rang the doorbell at 8 a.m. at the same time he's losing his job, because friends knew that he was still sick, and a friend from out of state had groceries delivered to my house at 8 a.m. So I'm like sobbing, right? So he comes home. We're trying to navigate this sudden job loss and what does it mean while you're ill right before Christmas, and what are we going to do? And at lunchtime, the doorbell rang again. And there was a friend standing on the porch with food from the Whole Foods hot bar for us for lunch. Not knowing about the job loss, just not knowing at all. About 5 p.m., my doorbell rings again. And there is another friend standing on the doorstep with soup and bread and salad and a bottle of wine, because they knew that he was still sick. So within just a 24-hour period of him finding out that he's still sick, the meds are not working, he's lost his job, we had 3 separate people show up for us in very physical, tangible ways, taking care of us. And then when the news was, we told everyone that he had lost his job, some of those same people came back with more stuff. We just felt very taken care of.
Yeah. And that was because you were already in community.
Yeah. And I think I can't, community can always be such a tricky thing because it kind of, sometimes it ebbs and flows and we go through different stages in life. Like when they're little, our kids are little, we care about things like park day and play groups a lot more. And when they get older, things get a little tighter. It's hard to develop community because they've got more things going on. But people really showed up for us. And I don't think we would have gotten through it as well. We would have gotten through it. I mean, you just got to soldier on, but it made it palatable. I had enrolled the kids in an online science class, or my daughter in an online science class for the spring. And like the week he got fired, like that Monday, I enrolled her in this class for the spring, and then he got fired, and I was thinking I was going to have to withdraw her just because of the cost. And I got a notification from the school that they were giving her, or someone was providing her with a full scholarship.
Wow.
So being able to kind of not worry about that and having other people step in to teach some things that I don't really have the expertise, like science, was super helpful because it was one less thing for me to worry about. Have other people take over some things that I couldn't do, whether it was shopping or cooking or teaching my kid a course, or helping out with rides, helping out with carpooling.
Yeah. So, I mean, would you say that your community was one of the main thing, and these moments of amazing grace were the things that kept you guys going, or were there other things in your world and your life and the rhythm and the practices of your family and homeschool that kept you going as well?
I think strong community support. I think it really drew us together as a family. And my kids were old enough, so they weren't little, which really helps. It would be very different if someone was trying to go through all of this with, younger children. My kids were old enough to help take care of themselves. I didn't have to, they were, let's see, Killian was in junior high, so almost teenagers and a teenager. So they understood and were able to chip in. They helped with a bunch of stuff.
That's awesome.
So our strong family unit, strong community. And then this always surprises people, but I have no problem asking for help. Like I have this very, independent persona, but if I need help, I'll ask for it. And I think that's just pivotal because people can say yes or say no, and people offer, I'll be like, yeah, actually I could use some help with this. And I would be very specific. I could use a meal, or I need someone to pick up groceries for me, or can you please give my kid a ride? And people showed up. Yeah. So
you didn't have a problem asking.
I don't have a problem asking,
because girl, I get in my pride and I don't want to ask for help. Like I know I struggle. So that's powerful. That's powerful. Can we say that louder for the people in the back? Ask for help.
When you need it, ask for help.
Yeah.
And I mean, if you can't, if you can't help, then say no. So that works both ways, right? Or offer, like if I've got the bandwidth, I'll help somebody. We got helped so much. How could I not help other people if they need it?
So, like one of the things I remember feeling, and like what people would ask, what can I do to help? And my mind would go blank. And because I would just be feeling all the feelings of the thing that we were going through. How did you figure out what you needed so that you could answer that in real time?
Well, meals was very clear. Like that's easy. People can make a meal. And people, we got sent gift cards, to places like Walmart, or the grocery store. We had people send us money, like really, and it was funny. Some people said, this is only for fun. Don't spend this on your needs. Like do something fun for yourself.
Yeah.
Like, they kind of would tell us that. But so a lot of it just came in. But if someone asked for help, and I car rides were something I knew I needed help with because I was trying to navigate all of that.
Right.
So that there were a few things that were just easy. And asking for a meal, or we had someone came and helped us move some furniture around and do some things that Joshua couldn't do because he couldn't, be active.
That's a really good, so maybe a good practice would be like, if you're in the middle of crisis, in a crisis, while you have a moment, when you notice, like anytime you think, have a running list of things people can help with. And when you have that moment where you're like, I can't deal with this, put that on the list if it's something someone else can do. And maybe in a moment where somebody's not asking you, go ahead and just capture that stuff So when somebody does ask, what can you help with? I'm like, well, actually,
Yeah.
I have a
And when
list
you're
right
offering, be very
here.
concrete. Because when you're in the middle of trauma and stuff like that, you can't think all the time because there's
Right.
too many things.
Right.
And so if you're offering, can I bring you a meal on Tuesday? Or can I go fill up your car with gas? Or what do you need at the grocery store? I've had so many people say, I'm going to the grocery store. What do you need?
Mm.
Or do your kids need a ride? Whatever you're able to help with, that that your skill set is. Can I come, mop your floors for you? Like,
Mm-hmm.
be very specific. And people, I think our pride gets in the way, like, no, you can't come in and see my floors. I'm like, well, you're going
Yeah.
through a lot. They're probably dirty and, you don't need to worry about it right now.
Yeah.
Or,
Yeah.
just so being as concrete as you can with what you can help with.
Yeah. Well, that's great. Thank you for that. Is there any other external supports? I heard you mention certain classes your kids were in, or was there anything else like in terms of the actual getting schoolwork done? I know you said you adjusted your expectations, you let some stuff go. What were the things you held on to? They're like, okay, this academic stuff, we're going to make sure. Did you have any standards like that? Or
I'm trying to think of the most recent time. Farming out MJ science class to someone else was super helpful.
mm-hmm.
And it just was one less thing for me to worry about. All her math, I had someone else take care of all her math. And that was really when I learned to let go of being in control of her math. Because I'd had a tutor for her, but I still kind of wanted to be in charge of it. And that was my cue. I was like, you know what? This is her thing. She's got this. They have a great relationship. I'm just going to let this one go.
Mm-hmm.
Killian was in a homeschool group, and I just I wasn't able to pay as much attention and stay on top of his stuff. And I think all the teachers that he had understood that.
Mm-hmm.
There was just no bandwidth for it. So they kind of helped keep him on track there.
Okay. So classes really helped take some of the burden off because you knew you could just.
They did. And ironically, even with that, we did end up pulling him out of the program at spring break.
Mm-hmm.
For the simple fact that, and this is a thing, I think families need to do what's best for themselves and for their family. And what we found is that with all of the stress of his father's illness and then his father's job loss, Killian really just needed to be at home more. Because he was dealing with that, doing everything he could to take care of himself, going to school, doing ballet. So we ended up just bringing him home and just pulling him out of everything. So ironically, the classes did help. And then we thought for a while that it was the best thing for him to bring him home.
Yeah.
So we were all at home. And I think that for him, that helped just calm him and decrease his anxiety.
Really just asking.
So sometimes they work great, and sometimes you have to do what's best for your family.
Yeah. Well, there you go.
But then we ended up putting both kids in a full science classes the next year.
Mm-hmm.
We did such a great experience with it, and it helped us out so much that we did it again. And she still has her math tutor.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is ask, what does your kid need? Sometimes the best thing for them, and then being open to whatever that answer is and being okay with that.
And drawing on your strengths. So, my strengths are in humanities. They're not in the sciences. And it would be great if I could do all of it, but homeschool moms, you cannot do all of it. You just have to repeat that to yourself. And so finding other people who were good at what they did, who could help me and take that off my back, was definitely something that was pivotal for my sanity.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, even in classrooms, they have the humanities in elementary school, they have a humanities teacher, and then they have the foreign language teacher, the art teacher, they have the science and math teacher. Nobody teaches all the subjects in any school.
You can't be an expert.
Why would we think we could do that as homeschool moms? That's ridiculous.
You can't be an expert at you can't be an expert at everything. You have to focus on something.
Absolutely. So you actually are teaching online and have been for the last 2 years, right?
This would be my second full year. I did it a few years ago too.
Yeah. So tell me about your program online. What are you teaching? What classes? What's whatever you want to share. What are you excited about?
So I found that, putting my kids in a class where someone else who was an expert at that was really good for them. Mm-hmm. It also enabled them to understand as a homeschool mom, you ask your kids, finish this paper, turn it in by 3, and then they don't do it, and big deal, right? Having an external teacher to hold their feet to the fire on certain things was super helpful for them learning how to manage their work. So I decided to teach online first because I just love the things that I'm teaching, and because I wanted to have other students to interact with my kids and the things that we were learning. So in the literature that we were learning, it's like, I want other kids to be able to talk about literature with my kids. So let's teach a class. You know, I want other kids to be able to bounce ideas off my kid when they're learning to write a paper and learning what's important. So,
right. And
so
by
I
the way,
started
you're an
teaching.
amazing literature and writing teacher.
Thank you. I have so much fun. I just have the best time. So I just think it's great. So I started my classes, and they were all originally going to be in person. Last year I had one fully online class, and then the other two classes were in person. And then when COVID hit, everything moved online.
Okay. So what classes are you teaching this coming year?
Yeah. So this year I am teaching medieval literature. So we'll spend the fall doing British literature, Beowulf, Sir Gawain, Canterbury Tales, and then we'll do Lord of the Rings, which all the kids are super excited about.
Yay.
And then in the spring, we'll do one of my favorites, the Divine Comedy. So we'll spend the entire spring reading and studying that and a few other things that kind of go along with it. So I'm really excited about that. And then I'm teaching a literary analysis paper writing class.
And they can take those separately?
Those are two separate classes, yeah. So kids can take the literature class without having to write the papers. So, because reading and, you know, they go so hand in hand, but they are separate skills.
They are.
So I want to make sure we can just kind of keep our, you know, the logos simple and focus on one thing at a time.
I think that's so brilliant, because I can't tell you how many times I've had, you know, it's always a struggle when you teach just the writing class and there are not also your literature students, and you're like, you don't know how to read, and that's why you can't write. And, you know, it's like you want to give them coaching in the literature, but then you're like, we don't have time for that in this class. And I mean, that people just don't. I love that you made that understanding, that point of that reciprocal nature of reading and writing, and how important it is to have both of those skills.
And there will be some explanation of how to read literature in the writing class, because you have to have it, but it's primarily focusing on how to write about literature. So
but ideally they would take both of those classes, I'm thinking.
All the kids in my writing class, I think, are taking the literature class.
Yeah.
Or maybe one or two that aren't, but I think they've got pretty good solid backgrounds and how to read.
That's awesome.
At this point, you know, I have room still, so maybe I'll get some more kids.
Yes.
So I'm teaching those two, medieval literature, literary analysis, and then I'm teaching Lost Tools of Writing level 2.
Okay.
I decided not to teach level 1 this year. I'd like to make sure kids have a really strong background in literary analysis writing before they transition into rhetoric writing. And so I'm requiring students who want to take Lost Tools from me to have literary analysis first.
Okay.
And so I'm not doing LTW1 this year, but I had some kids last year who are ready to go to LTW2, mostly juniors and seniors. Well, all juniors and seniors. So they'll take that class. So I'm teaching those things.
Awesome.
So I'm keeping it small. A friend gave me a really good piece of advice. She said, you know, my priority is to homeschool my children. Like their education is my priority. Of all the other things that I do, that's the number one priority. So anything that I'm doing outside of that, if it takes away from that, then I need to think very hard about whether or not that's worth doing.
Right.
So all of the classes that I teach, my kids take. So they're both in the literature class, and then one of each is in the 2 writing classes. So it's supporting my homeschool as well.
Yeah, I've kind of had to do the same thing, you know, especially when I became a single mom. I had to decide, well, I have to provide for my family now. What am I going to do for work? And so rather than go get, you know, a job somewhere else, I was like, how can I turn what I've been doing with Paideia Fellowship into a way to earn money so that it can harmonize with homeschooling, so I don't have to give up homeschooling. And so if there's a way, you know, to be creative in your home, if you're going through something like this, to say, how can I harmonize this stuff together? And you know, you never know, like, you know, what can you do? That's the ideal way to go. And it
may not always work, you know, I mean, we did consider I might need to go get a job when, you know, Joshua was out of work. That was a consideration. I will say this is a little soapbox I have. I don't talk about much, but I cannot overemphasize the importance of having an emergency fund. Yeah. Putting away money to live on. That saved our bacon. Yeah. So that's what kept me from having to go find a job, because that, you know, things happen in life and you never know, and things could change, but all things being equal, everything I do can focus on supporting my kids' homeschool, or, you know, my personal development, or, you know, they both dance ballet at a very high level. So those are the priorities. So they have to fall in line with those priorities.
Yeah. Amen, sister.
All
Well,
things being equal.
right.
Wrenches are another story.
Sometimes you have to, like, you know, I waited tables for, you know, a couple months, and I've taken some side gigs doing things that didn't match up. And, you know, there was seasons, but my goal was to always have the primary work be something that harmonized.
Right. And I've got 2 years left with MJ.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, they're so much more independent. Like, she can do all of her schoolwork on her own, which is great, but also horrible. Like, I want to do this with you, right? You know, like, that's why I homeschool. I want to spend time with my kids. I want to read with them. I want to talk with them. I want to argue with them and have discussions.
Right.
And, you know, when they're super independent, sometimes you forget to carve that time out, because it's tempting when they're so independent to, like, oh, I can go do this now.
Yeah.
So, and I have a really bad habit of taking on too much. I mean, you read my bio. I like to take on new projects all the time.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like the energy. I get bored real easy.
Yeah.
So I like having lots of things to do.
Yeah.
And that's me. I mean, not everyone's like that. And I know people who have a lot more energy than I do. So, you know, people can look at that and go, wow, you do a lot. I'm like, yeah, I do a lot, but that's because I have got the bandwidth for it.
Right. And
other people don't.
I think that's another good point, is just like being observant of ourselves, being honest with ourselves, and being okay with that. You know, I keep thinking of the Serenity Prayer as you talk, actually, you know.
Talking to me makes you think of the Serenity Prayer.
Well,
fair. That's fair.
No, not what you're thinking. Stop it. I was thinking, like, wow, she's really mastered what she can control and what she can't control, and just is okay with that. Like, because that's the crux of the Serenity Prayer. Like, you know, give me the serenity to accept the things that I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. So it's like 3 major sections, like accepting what I can't change, changing what I can, and, you know, discerning what those things are. And to me, it sounds like you've really mastered that. Like, you know, I can't say the same from it. Like, I hold on to stuff that I can't control, and it causes a lot of stress in my life. And, you know, I'm learning to release that, but that's a practice. Like, it's a lifelong practice for me, learning to release what I can't control. So yeah.
I've tried to set some good boundaries in my life. I think I've learned the sleep, the exercise, food, you know, I try to keep those things dialed in. And then one of the things I did this past year was I don't work on Sundays, like, at all. Like, I used to be so busy with everything that especially when Josh was sick, that I was just constantly doing stuff all the time because I constantly couldn't catch up. And I said, I'm not doing anything on Sundays. I don't respond to student emails. I don't respond to parents. I don't work on anything. I don't grade anything. I don't plan anything. Occasionally something will come up where, you know, you will have to, but generally I'm like, you know what? This is my life. It's not that important. It's not going to make any huge difference in, you know, how I wake up the next day or how I go to sleep at night or my relationship with Christ, and it can wait.
Yeah.
And so I've really set that pretty hard. I don't work on Sundays. So
that's good. Yeah. Well,
so boundaries, I think having boundaries about your work and what you'll do and when.
Right. And that can be hard to cultivate. And so just like having that courage to set the boundary and just telling yourself it's going to be okay. The world does not rely on, if I don't work on Sunday, the world's going to still move, and I'm not so powerful and such a savior that I can't, you know, like, it matters that, you know, like that sort of thing.
Yeah. And I think recognizing what our role is, like, you know, for my kids, obviously I'm their mother, like, this is the most important thing, but for my other students, I love them. And I think what I do is important, but I think sometimes as teachers, we can overestimate the role that we're playing and the job that we're doing. You know, we're teaching. Right. And I think putting it into the proper perspective is important.
Yeah. Yeah. Amen. Well, thank you so much for sharing everything that you've shared today about your classes, about how you've gone through these hard things and what you've done to, you know, still thrive in the
Yeah, I'm
midst of
excited to see who's going to get sick this year, you know? Like,
Hey, no, stop that. Stop. No. None of that bad juju here.
as long as it's not me. No,
Girl, you better stop. Oh my gosh. Well, do you have any last words for the people watching today?
I think everyone's a little anxious about the school year.
Mm-hmm.
Just, it's very tempting to go, just calm down, but no one ever calms down when you say to calm down. Just take a breath, take it one day at a time,
Mm-hmm.
do what is best for you and your family, and, you know, pursue excellence in the best way that you know how.
Yeah.
And trust your instincts.
Amen.
They're probably good.
Amen. Well, thank you for that. And so if people are interested in your class or connecting with you, can you tell us where to go?
Oh, yeah. My website is kristenrudd.com, KristenRudd. I can answer questions through the contact form there. They can sign up for classes there. Got links to a lot of the stuff that I do there. I'm on Facebook. I'm easy to find. And I'm on Twitter at Kristen Rudd.
All right. Well, it's been lovely chatting with you. And
it's good to chat with you too. Always a pleasure.
Yeah, and thank you everybody for listening, and definitely check out Kristen Rudd on Twitter, Facebook, and her website. And until next time.